Welcome to the Clean Slate, a podcast where we chat about facilities management, commercial cleaning, and keeping the working world safe, clean, efficient, and free from risk. I'm your host, Trista Sobek. Today's topic is all about control. The control that you as a manager or business owner think you have over your facilities, buildings, and other assets. The control you actually don't have, and how you can gain control should you need more by taking a different approach to your facilities management style. In today's economic climate, the knee-jerk response is to pull work in-house because there is this facade that you are cutting costs, slashing more charges, and can oversee, well, everything. But nothing can be further from the truth. Here to break all that down for us is Mary Torrado. Welcome, Mary.
Hi.
Mary is Vice President of Strategic Operations and Customer Experience at OpenWorks Facilities Management, headquartered in Phoenix, Arizona. Here she has worked for large facilities management brands and has more than 15 years of facility management experience. She is a wealth of knowledge about all things in the biz. And today we're going to chat with her about this idea of control. Many executives and managers want to oversee the day-to-day of their building's tasks, and they want to believe that they are in control. Mary, can you give me some examples of the control at the director level that leaders think they have?
Yeah, absolutely. Excited to have this chapter with you, Trista. So let's peel that back a little bit regarding control. I mean, everyone likes control. Not everyone, but a lot of people like control of different facets of their work environment, especially through the management lens, right? There is a concept that the more control you have, the better the results that you will obtain. So let's go through a little bit of those items of what truly is control and what is the misconception from a facility standpoint for in-house services versus outsourcing. So depending on the type of level of service needed and the type of industry that an individual is in, facilities management is often not their core vertical. This leads to an influx of added cost. For example, when you look at in-house in aspect of employment, you think about just the employee doing the service. But what it's often not taken into consideration is the other added layers of that employee, right? Who is going to be managing that employee? Who is going to be training that employee? Who's going to make sure that that employee is compliant with OSHA standards? And also from that management standpoint, who is also not only from training and delivery perspective, who is helping ensure that if that employee does not come in, who is backfilling for that position? There are so many layers involved into actually the costs associated with managing and having that employee, because of that is not their core vertical. That is not their core service delivery. It's not the skill set that they have. So they have to learn themselves and then train on it. Then they have to make sure that their process is in place of how do you do the training? How do you make sure that someone is cleaning correctly, updating themselves on the standard practices of cleaning, updating with OSHA compliance, updating with chemical usage. There's so many facets of that. Overall in research done, the average amount of total costs on overhead for an employee taken into in-house is around 25% higher than outsourcing it to a company that specifically tailors to that and has, they know what, how to do that, deliver that service. And so it's a lot different. So when going back to the management component, you have, probably you'll hire a facilities director then to manage those facilities and manage those employees. But that sometimes it's a little too much for a facilities director to take on. So then they have to have a supervisor, and that supervisor may need a lead and so forth, and adding on layers and layers of cost, and also the time consumption that is involved in making sure that individual is set up for success. So, do they have the right tools and equipment? Do they know how to do it? Do they know how the process works, and so forth? So, there is a lot of cost associated to that control aspect. But then, when you go back into the actual control component, like even though they have all of that and they have everything zeroed in, what control do they actually have for them having all those individuals versus a company? Because of the fact that there is labor laws, right?
Right.
Taken into consideration. So even if you have all those components that you're doing self delivery on, what does that control look like? Like, how is that gaining them the desired results by having that sort of control that they seek?
Exactly. And I want to go back to one thing that you said that was really important that I picked up on. They aren't exactly in that vertical. So, can you talk a little bit about the industry and how it's changed and some of the training, the specific training that folks get, especially if they are a commercial cleaner?
Absolutely. So you're totally right. When individuals think about cleaning, they're like, "Oh yeah, I do that. I clean at home. You know, it's not a big deal. It's trash. It's restrooms. It's nothing major. It's not rocket science, right?" But there, if you have been in the industry long enough, you know that it's just not that. I mean, there is so many components that could be detrimental to a facility that need to be taken into consideration. Not only the cleaning process itself, but the safety of the employees performing the cleaning, and also the safety of, whoever is in that facility, right? Because at times the cleaning is not done, relatively there is a large portion of cleaning that's being done when individuals are not around. But for a lot of the times there is cleaning being done when there is individuals in the facility, whether it be, visitors, clients, or, the employees themselves in that space. It's their safety that needs to be taken into consideration. So, the training that is involved in when you become a subject expert matter in it, and a company that really hones in onto what it takes to deliver that service, they have to know those skill sets. They have to know the cores of how to do the process, but also to remain compliant. There is a lot of training involved, a lot of courses, a lot of ongoing courses that need to be refreshers, OSHA courses, bloodborne pathogen courses, so many different chemistry of chemicals, what not to mix. I've seen people just think like, the more the merrier. And they're like mixing all the chemicals, and they're like, I'm like, please don't mix chemicals. Like that is,
It'll just be
it's so,
stronger. The more, the better.
yeah, those fumes will definitely, that's not a good idea. But not only that, it's like talking about like the process of cleaning. There are so many things that people don't take into consideration of the process of cleaning, such as, the services to take into consideration. Like when you are doing it and you're in the industry and you're being trained, you know which chemicals not to put on what surfaces because it will damage it. So it's not only the visual component of like, yes, this is going to ruin a surface, but then also there's dwell times. There is the difference between cleaning and disinfecting, like how the process needs to be done in a correct manner in order for the surface to be clean. Also taking consideration chemicals that shouldn't be used in locations, especially because in this day and age, we have a lot of individuals that do have allergies that could be catastrophic for them if the cleaning process wasn't taking into consideration for commercial grade chemicals. I've seen some people that do the cleaning themselves, and they think it's as simple as cleaning your own home, and they do utilize house cleaning chemicals, and individuals that's hard for their breathing. It's hard for their, for when they're inhaling that. And there is allergens components to that aspect too as well.
What happens when OSHA or somebody like this comes in and says, you're not in compliance, you're not in compliance, there's a ding, there's a ding? I'm assuming there's a lot of ramifications that could happen, that could even up until stopping the entire process of what a company is doing.
Inspections can vary by different types of verticals and different types of facilities. So, education, medical have different parameters, but they all get inspected, right? And so they do get inspected on not only the cleanliness of the facility, but also on the OSHA compliance. So, if the chemicals are being stored in the facility, how they're being stored, where, it's located, not only like the location of it, but like I see sometimes people often put chemicals on top of the water heater, or they put them on the floor and you're not supposed to do that, or they don't have labels on it. So you don't know if that's actually Kool-Aid or if it's Windex and things like that. So it's like those regulatory controls as well, but then also, the cleanliness level of the facility. Is it safe for the people involved? If it's at an unsafe level, different types of facilities could face ramifications of being shut down.
Right. And then I would assume then you're losing a lot of money as you're shut down. So I'm thinking about warehouses, for example, if they're shut down and they're not able to pick and pack the products that they need to get out the door, their minute by minute is a dollar out the door that they're just losing out on because they've been shut down.
Oh, yeah. 100% on that, because of the fact that it's not only stopping their production, so it's stopping whatever revenue they would have generated that day, but it's also it's a focal point because they rely on customers, right? And so if there were to be shut down, their clients could pull contract and they won't have them as a client, and they could lose that revenue for that as a whole, not only for that day, but yeah, during a single day of being lost, depending on the type of manufacturing or the distribution center, it could be upwards of the hundreds of thousands of dollars lost, within a few hours.
Right, right. One thing that I wanted to bring up is the dreaded COVID word that has been such an issue, and over the last couple of years, because it's still here. People are still getting COVID. People are still getting sick, right? But what do you say to the folks who used an outsourced situation during COVID? Because it was serious. People were going to the hospital. People were perishing. So might as well go outside, right? Let's get the heavy hitters in here. Let's disinfect. Let's take care of the COVID. And now that COVID is quote unquote over, or it hasn't been in the media as much, they can say, all right, let's get rid of those outsourced folks and bring our own folks in. What's your response to that?
There is a reason that they went outsourcing during that time frame. And again, going back to that, that's not their key or vertical. Long-term thinking is, yes, you've done away with that because it's no longer a scare, right? People are living with it, manageable, and it's kind of become an item that now we are okay with as far as like risk is concerned. But there is that thinking that what happens when the next thing comes up? What is the plan? Do you take it back outsourcing, and do you keep doing that, seesaw effect of like take it outsource, insource, outsource, because you don't have the time to keep up with the trends of cleanliness? But thinking of like customers that have gone back in house because they no longer need that level of cleanliness, it's what happens when something else comes up and you need that added resource and help, because of the fact they may not have the time to do the research. They don't have the time to go and do a seminar all day just to discuss chemicals. And that's
Right.
what we do. We do take the time to take our seminars to keep up to date with equipment solutions, and we have so many individuals that have knowledge on not only core like verticals, but also the process in place. Like, how do you do that, and what tools are needed, and how do you do that process, and how do you train on it too? Because training is a huge component of the delivery. So it's also remodifying training material, literature, videos. When you do on the job training, hands-on training, like how do you do that? What is the process for that? Who is doing that? And all of those things. So, we, as an individual who's providing that service, we're doing all of that for you.
Right, right. So now let's circle back to the beginning of our conversation about control. So folks want to believe that they're in control when they have people doing this in house. But what happens when somebody says to a manager or someone at the C suite, we should really outsource this? And when somebody gets scared, they don't want to make that decision and say, yes, let's go outsource.
I do tell everyone, do your homework, do your due process to vet who you're going with and understand what, they're providing, what service they're providing to you. And the nice part, and I've been in a lot of different types of rollouts where we did take clients that were formerly in-house to outsource. And it's a scary thing, right? It is. It's totally scary for them and completely normal and acceptable for that to happen. And how do they maintain that control? I do say that even if you're outsourcing, you have total control. You have total control because the control that you hold and the power that you hold is your contract, right? Your agreement that this company is agreeing to perform to this standard that you have accepted. Your, acceptance of the standard they put in place. They've tailored specifications for your facility, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, as far as like how many times we're going to do it in the facilities. So all of those things, that's the commitment that's tied into that. And they have the full autonomy to state that, what are some of the levels acceptable or not acceptable for them. There is that communication. It's not just like, the cleaner shows up and the individual is there and the employee is there and all of a sudden it's like, hey, I'm here. It's not that. It's a very long process that's written out in communication with the client. Like these are the target dates. This is when we're going to do this, by when. And we have all of that, written and outlined as far as this is where we're going to hit this target. This is when we're going to do introductions. We're going to do a walkthrough. We're going to do a soft rollout. We're going to phase in certain facilities into this category. And then we're also going to make sure that we have all the components in place, right? So emergency contacts, who do we go for what, all the in and outs of the facility. So we learn beforehand everything that we should know, need to know basis about the facility. So we're making sure that we're setting up the individuals for success, for delivering that service, and we have all of those components very much measured out and outlined, and there is communication flowing through from the company to the client as far as this is what we're doing, this is when we're doing it, and having them a part of that transition. So they're very, very well informed and they know every step of the way what's happening, and so they still maintain a certain level of control of what's happening.
One of the things that I'm wondering, Mary, when I sit here today and I look at all the tech layoffs and the mass layoffs that are happening over and over and over again, especially in tech that we're seeing, unfortunately, is this idea of, is it a good time to outsource when you're having all these layoffs? How can you kind of look at that and say, this is something that should be done?
Absolutely. So part of, there is that balance of managing the funds and what is the overall arching cost. Like I personally, I'm a frugal person, right? I will do stuff on my own at home all the time. If there is a project that I can do, I will YouTube it and I will do it and I will save the cost. But there is certain things I do not touch in my home, right? There's things that forever, ever, I will always outsource. And one of them is like plumbing, right? I will never touch the plumbing because,
You
if
don't
I
want to
do
flood.
something, yeah, something
Flood
I
in your
do
house.
incorrectly could cost me so much more in the long run, right? Just to save that minimal dollar amount up front could ultimately lead me spending a lot of money, over time. And that's the same concept that I think of like other things as well. So like, for example, like cleaning, we were discussing that there is more to cleaning than, just when you think about like, trash and restrooms, there's a lot more of thought and process and implementation put into place for cleaning itself and maintaining a facility, not only from the cleanliness, but as a whole of other things like pest control and landscaping and so many different facets of facilities management. But going back to the cleaning aspect, when you think about that cost associated with that service delivery, it's also not taking into consideration the other costs that you're preventing from happening, right? Such as liability part. So if you're outsourcing, that company is taking full liability for those services. That's taking that stress off the individual's plate, and also the cost associated should something happen in correlation with that.
Like
for
a
example,
slip or a fall or somebody hurting
yeah,
themselves because they're cleaning, because it can be a dangerous proposition to clean some of these places.
yeah, absolutely. It's the a mitigation of costs of that, but it's also like, not only like the, slipping and falling is one of the major components that could occur from someone cleaning and someone, not seeing that someone just mopped the floor and falling and that there was not proper signage and things like that. But also like what happens if the measures weren't put into place and then that center or that facility is shut down. That is the hard cost associated with the ripple effect of that occurred. Or let's say, the individual didn't handle chemicals correctly and someone became injured. That's a cost for the facility that they'll have to take, not including fines and other things that they would incur. So those added costs and associated, to me, like that risk is far more outweighing than that cost of outsourcing the company that you're going to be needing those services for.
Well, is there anything that you think we didn't cover when it comes to outsourcing or helping places make that decision of should they go in-house, should they go outsource? Anything that we didn't cover that would help them make that decision.
Absolutely. I do think like, thinking outside the box, going through the list of pros and cons for, as far as opening their horizon, especially like if they've never done it before, as far as outsourcing or whatnot, just, things that they're used to doing as a whole for their organization, like taking a step back and looking at it. Is this the most effective thing that I could be doing for my organization? Is outsourcing a solution? If it is, like those added benefits that we discussed is something that may be not being taken in consideration nowadays as far as the risk, the liability, the cost, not taking in consideration like the hard costs of different supplies and materials, but also the labor costs and associated with the management of the labor being done itself. So those other costs not taken into consideration. And overall the time, right? The time that they could be spent doing something for their organization to add more into whatever their core knowledge and their expertise are in order to help and maintain their organization, that they're spending on other things that they could be putting on someone else. So there are so many multiple facets for them to review and take a look at what should, or can work for them. Is, just taking a step back and going through all those multiple avenues and looking at from a different lens as far as what can work for them.
I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the Clean Slate. And you have been very informative as far as should a place choose in-house cleaning or outsourcing, and it's been quite illuminating. So talking about all the risk that you can't see and you kind of don't know it's there until it pops up. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Trista.
Thank you to Mary Torrado with OpenWorks for joining us to discuss the value of outsourcing versus hiring your own in-house cleaning team. Enjoying the podcast? Leave a review. To otherwise support our podcast, please share and follow us on your favorite streaming platform. You can also visit our website to find show notes and more info on each episode at www.openworksweb.com/podcast. The Clean Slate returns in May with all things facility management and commercial cleaning. Want to be a guest on an upcoming podcast? Check out the information in the description to apply. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep it clean!